Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The former undisputed champion Lennox Lewis has delivered a withering assessment of Joseph Parker and his flaws, but believes that they can be fixed with the right training. Lewis, he's spoken to the New Zealand Herald. He says Joseph Parker has a couple of things that he does wrong. Good fighters can really take advantage of that. And they did. And one of the big problems is that he moves straight back. He doesn't give you angles, and a blind man can basically weather 2 punches from Joseph Parker and throw 4 punches back, and he will hit him because he only moves back in the same space. His biggest advantage is actually speed. He's got good speed and combinations. But another problem is that he telegraphs his right hand. His right hand is a looping right hand. Anybody can stop that or see that. So those are the 2 things that I see straight away. These things can be fixed. He just needs the proper training. And I'm not saying that he has a bad trainer. He just needs someone to teach him a couple of things. He can still be with his trainer. He just needs to learn. And that was the big thing with me in boxing. To make sure that I learned the craft well so that when I stepped in the ring, I had all these things sorted out. A good trainer can't look at me and say, hey, look at this guy, he backs up and he telegraphs his right hand. All those weaknesses I've got, I've made them strengths. When you look at Parker's last fight, he needed to be more adaptable, and I don't think he had the knowledge to help him once he went behind. So it's more about him relearning and being committed to practicing those techniques, rather than a question of who he is fighting. What you do basically is go and practice all the things you've learned. If he takes some time out and starts doing the proper fundamentals and training, he has to get in the ring and do the same things. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and that is true to a certain degree. It's like golf. If you start off bad, that's just the way you're going to be doing it. It's more about reprogramming himself and then working on that. I had to do that. That's what made me a 5-dimensional fighter. In the fight, I can change my style, I can throw down the middle of the ring, but when it comes time for me to move, I'll be elusive, I'll move about. Those were Lennox Lewis's statements to the New Zealand Herald. Very interesting stuff, and Lewis touches on some things that fans have been talking about for a while in relation to Joseph Parker, about him moving back in straight lines. And I would also add, he's often more upright than we'd like to see him, his chin can be exposed and his hands are down. Fans have been banging on about that sort of stuff for quite a long time. But Lewis has a point. Moving back in straight lines, it's going to make him an easier target to plan against and predict where he's going to be after he throws his punches, because you know where he's going to be. But I would balance Lewis's comments out by saying, Joseph Parker, he has been more defensively responsible and harder to hit in the past year or two. Think the Anthony Joshua fight where he proved to be very elusive. But some of that did clearly come down to a different mindset and also a different strategy. Whereas against Dillian Whyte, he was more willing to come forward, more willing to trade, and in general, he was more aggressive. Lewis also believes that Parker's right hand is not nearly as effective as it could be because he's telegraphing it from so far away. And to be fair, Dillian Whyte was able to deal with that looping right hand for much of the Parker fight. It became easier to find Whyte later on though, when he was tired, but earlier on he was seeing it. And so did Joshua, and so did Hughie Fury before that. The real success that Parker has had with the right hand as a weapon in his career was against lower tier opposition, many of which were, clearly just there to turn up for a payday and really nothing more. But there is a clear theme running through Lewis's statements. Joseph Parker's training, it needs to change to fix what Lewis believes are fundamental flaws. So the old chestnut of Parker's setup is now laid bare again to be discussed, to be dissected. Lewis, he's saying that Parker, he needs to make adjustments, which effectively means Kevin Barry, his trainer, needs to make adjustments and address the issues that Lewis has raised. But will Kevin Barry be open to the advice? Will he be willing to change his methods? Or indeed seek input from others? I'm not so sure. What we do know is Parker is 100% committed to staying with Kevin Barry, who I would note did state in the wake of the Dillian Whyte fight that he couldn't throw the punches for Joseph Parker. And that's certainly true, but Parker is executing Barry's strategy, and he's been under his tutelage for 6 years. The way that he fights is a representation of Barry's training and teaching. And now we have a Hall of Famer, the former undisputed champion Lennox Lewis, openly saying Parker's got these 2 major but fixable flaws. And these flaws Lewis has identified, they didn't just start with the Dillian Whyte fight, as I did allude to earlier. Lewis is also adamant that Parker, as he puts it, needs proper training, and that he should take some time out and start doing the proper fundamentals in training and reprogram himself. I mean, while Lewis is saying that Kevin Barry isn't a bad trainer, his overall assessment and the comments regarding Joseph Parker and what he calls a couple of fundamental flaws, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement of Barry either. And I'm sure Barry will bristle at what's essentially a stinging assessment wrapped up in some thoughtful analysis. It's the equivalent of swallowing a dead rat for Kevin Barry, because it's a public rebuke of sorts to what he's been doing with Parker in their training. Lewis suggests that Parker, he needs to take some time out now. He really needs to focus on the issues that he's identified. But will Joseph Parker do that? I'm not so sure. Parker and his team have spoken about wanting to be back in the ring before the end of the year. And if that were to happen, presumably the latest a fight could be is in mid-December. And if you work back from that, he'd likely have to start an 8-week training camp, which would mean the latest they could announce the fight would be in about mid-October. That's not that far away now. And even if tweaks were made in the gym, would one training camp be enough to eradicate habits that have been forged over several years? I'm not so sure. It's likely the longer a fight goes on, if he's just sort of bedded some of these things in, that he would sort of slip back into some old habits, revert to type, revert to what he knows best and is comfortable with. We've seen that with Joseph Parker before. He actually has a pattern to the way that he fights. He does certain things in different stages of fights. He uses the jab early, and then in different rounds through the middle, he tends to sort of become more low volume, more 1-2 punch sort of stuff. And some of that, I do believe, is tied to how much energy he's got. I'd like to think that Joseph Parker could look at these comments from Lennox Lewis and look at it as an opportunity. As Lewis said, when he was able to overcome his weaknesses, identify them with his trainer, from others, get the advice, work on it, and really sort of iron them out, he was able to turn them into his strengths. He became a much better boxer as a result of working on those things he wasn't quite so good at. I mean, you'd hope Parker would like to do something similar. And if he wants to get back to the top of the division, he just might have to do that. And there's an old saying that goes, if you do the same thing the same way over and over, you can always expect the same results. What do you make of it all? Did Lennox Lewis give some pearls here? Was it something that Kevin Barry and Joseph Parker need to hear? Will they make some adjustments, or are you expecting to see the same old Parker when he's out next? Drop a comment loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.